Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. I'm not going to let this story die. On Friday, the story came out that on the 5th of April, Farmington PD responded to the wrong address and killed an innocent man who responded to a door knock at 11:30 p.m. at night. To give you some context about where I live and what my city is like, we know, and again, we've never had a problem, I say we as a community, with what our police force response time usually is. We know that they have to traverse tons of area to get to us, to help us. That's why if we make a call, it's usually a big deal. Now, that's why I'm holding these guys' feet to the fire, because there's more to the story as it's evolved. Turns out that as the officer, they're not showing the body camera footage yet, which bothers me and bothers most of the public, I think. But he opened the screen door and took a step out, and that's when he was shot. At the same time this happened, his wife, Mr. Robert Dotson's wife, was also armed, started shooting. This caused more confusion until she figured out it was law enforcement. Now, again, I'm not making an excuse for any of this. Law enforcement should know better. Number one, in all the decision trees that they keep talking about, and there's been a lot of people lately on social media and on specifically on Farmington PD's media saying, hey, you can't second guess a cop. And in this case, I think we can, because nowhere in this decision tree of making decisions on life and death did someone actually bother to verify the address. This could have been a different situation, and probably would have been a different situation if they responded to the correct address. And that leads me to say, hey, wait, we need to really, really keep people's feet to the fire. There's another story of yet another homicide that seems to be tied to this. And I say that because, coincidentally, the man that was killed, two people were killed in a junkyard on the outskirts of town that is being investigated by San Juan County Sheriffs. Mr. Dotson is somehow tied to them. Now, could be speculation as to what's going on, but there usually isn't that much coincidence involved when you see two really, really harsh acts of violence in our small town without realizing and recognizing that there's probably some sort of tie there. Now, the conspiracy-minded people could say the law enforcement guys responded there and killed a witness. Could also be that Mr. Dotson was suiciding by cop. The only problem that I have with that is, how did they respond to the exact wrong address to make that happen? So you can armchair quarterback this all you want. The fact of the matter is, they responded to the wrong address and killed an innocent homeowner, in my opinion. And I think a lot of the opinion of the citizens of Farmington. At the same time, we're seeing calls nationwide for gun bans, because there seems to be more mental illness than we want to actually talk about. And this stat that keeps coming out is that there are more kids that die yearly because of guns. What they're not telling you is that they've recently added 18-year-olds to the CDC stats. And that the stats, if you look them up, and I put one up on the screen for you all, is directly from the CDC itself. These are unintentional accidents and suicide, or unintentional homicide. So, again, if suicides are a huge factor in people killing themselves, well, in gun deaths and gun violence, and that usually is the case. The left likes to talk about how, when they're talking about banning guns, that guns are the reason why people are just dying in massive groves. And in reality, there's some reality to that. But if you look at the gun death statistics from the FBI and you look at the gun statistics from the CDC and you compare the two, what you find 99% of the time is suicides take the lion's share. So if we have a problem with mass shootings now, because people are being stupid and taking a device that is made for defense and going out and hurting people, and we have an high incidence of suicide, there's only one common piece there, and that's the mental health aspect of all this. And no matter how we keep fighting about this, and we have some people that are zombies on the left that no matter how many times we can lead them to the water, show them the real stats, actually try to have a conversation, they won't. They only have one choice in their mind, and that's to get rid of the gun, because the gun is the problem. If you look at all the mass shootings that happen, there are two commonalities. One, they're in a gun-free zone. Two, they're mentally ill people that perpetrated these acts. You look at three, they'll say it was a gun. Okay? And they'll specifically try to pin it on the AR-15. But I just showed you, or just told you about, two of the most daunting and most common occurrences there. A gun-free zone where they know that these people in this area are soft targets, and these horrific acts can be perpetrated upon them without having to worry about someone aggressing on them with a firearm, responding to them in kind. The same thing goes with suicides. You know, the dark elephant in the room is if we have this many young people, or this many Americans in general, that are willing to kill themselves going through hard times, why aren't we talking about it? Why aren't we actually talking about the mental health issues that we have in the United States instead of stigmatizing them, instead of fighting over who's using our bathrooms? This hill, I understand why the right is willing to climb it and die on it. It's because you guys keep trying to push it on kids. And when you start trying to indoctrinate kids, or you start messing with kids in general, you're going to get a fight, period. I mean, you're talking about the survival of the human race there. You don't mess with kids. So why wouldn't we protect that valuable commodity, is what everyone in the 2A community keeps talking about, and no one keeps responding to us in kind. We've tried it your way. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of gun laws on the books right now, and none of them have stopped anything. If you look at Chicago, New York, California, they have the strictest gun laws in the land. All the bans you want. All the gun control that you've wanted. And yet they're some of the most violent areas on planet Earth. Why? Because you make innocent people defenseless. And making innocent people defenseless, whether you put them in a gun-free zone or you tie them down, there's no difference. The difference is the gun actually may stop them. Every one of these mass shootings are directly the length of time that they go on is directly proportional to the time it takes for the second person with a firearm to show up to stop them. You know, people wonder about what would it be like if we put more guns out on the street, like back in the Western times, I guess is what they think. Well, we live in the Southwest. I live in the Southwest. You know, we live in those rugged places, I guess. And I have to say that I'm more okay thinking that everybody is armed than they're not. And here's why. An armed society seems to be a polite society. There aren't as many of these mass shootings in areas that are really armed. You don't see them in police headquarters. You don't see them in banks. Why? Because they're usually armed guards, or the threat of an armed guard there. And the longer we take to take that little moment and realize the most obvious thing possible, we are watching people die. And at that, we can't even count on the agents of the state, like the PD, to show up and make sure that we're okay. Because if we respond to defend ourselves and defend our home, there's a huge chance that we die. Because the state is the only one that has a monopoly on violence right now. And there is absolutely a billion, I'm not going to say a billion because that would mean more people than there are in the United States. There's probably at least 70 million Americans that aren't willing to be defenseless because we've seen what happens in history. And as much as I like to let history die and, go forward in the future to see what's brighter for us, the harsh, cold fact of the matter is, throughout human history, the most likely person to survive is the one that's armed. And the longer we piss and moan and fight over this stupid idea that a sign is going to stop people, or that passing a law is going to stop actual people from going in and doing bad things. There already are laws against murder. There are already laws that say you're not supposed to take these firearms into these areas. Has it stopped a single person from going there to perpetrate these acts? No. What happens? Bad people go in, do bad thing. Poor people or people that are stuck in those areas get shot up. Agents of the state show up because they are allowed to, and then they stop the threat. Where is our equality as you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion? Where is our inclusion into being able to have the same right to violence? That is how our country was supposed to be designed. We have the same right to defend ourselves that law enforcement has. We have the same right to exist as anyone else. And yet you're telling us in certain areas we can't. Mr. Dotson seems like he did everything legally correct. The only problem I see him doing is that he answered the door with a firearm when it was law enforcement on the other side. And law enforcement, rather than taking a step back, I know that second sometimes can mean that your death is imminent. But the odds are you're probably going to live because you have body armor, you have the training, and you shouldn't be that sketchy to begin with. And if you're going to respond, how about you respond to the correct address? That is a huge failing. Like, share, subscribe, be great.